Story 1. Diagnosed with aggressive stage 3 colon cancer at just 32, I endured a painful 4-year battle. Story 2. Trigger warning. I walked in on a classmate who was attempting to harm himself in the restroom by injuring his arms and torso with a glass shard during a psychotic episode. He had been abused by his stepfather for nearly 5 years and completely broke down when people discovered the truth. He is now a licensed plumber, married with children. It takes immense strength to recover from such a traumatic experience. Story 3. I was abandoned by my son's mother, and it ruined my life. We were passing out candy and having fun on Halloween in 2019 when she casually mentioned mid-sentence that she was having an affair and was leaving. The next day, she took my 2 stepchildren and my son away. This began several years of alcohol abuse and mental health struggles. I gained so much weight, and to make matters worse, the person she left me for was an abuser with no money. She returned to me with the kids, seeking refuge multiple times over the past few years. I feel very conflicted. I want to fall in love and be with someone so badly, but I dread being abandoned again, which leaves me feeling lonely. Story 4. When I was 6 years old, I saw my mom get electrocuted by a lawnmower while taking care of a neighbor's lawn who was on vacation. I ran to the street and shouted for help, saying my mom was dying. Several people were walking by. They just stared at me and continued on their way. A person gardening 2 doors down went back to their backyard, and a man walking his dog turned around and walked in the other direction. No one tried to help. I was a screaming 6-year-old bursting with tears and fear, and no one did anything. I eventually unplugged the mower, and my mom recovered, although she sustained some lifelong injuries. I ran back home and called the police myself. This incident taught me that there is likely no one coming when you scream for help and that you are often on your own. This has led to an unhealthy hero complex, motivating me to help many people with mixed results. I have had people die in my arms, fought off muggers, and risked my life countless times for strangers. When I see someone in distress, I don't think. I just run and try to help. Story 5. My ex-girlfriend was self-harming, which made it difficult for me to end the relationship. I didn't want to be responsible for her injuries, but I managed to escape the situation. Story 6. When I was 8, I wasn't allowed to join a friend group because I weighed more than 30 kilograms. I was much taller than all the girls and already underweight. I developed anorexia and still struggle with it today, more than 10 years later. It has cost me a lot in sacrifices. Even today, when I feel left out, I find myself falling back into the cycle of skipping meals. Story 7. I was in college, ready to progress to my master's and doctorate, and continue my work in behavioral psychology while working in a video store, enjoying my side passion for film and music. I had also been involved as a second unit director and composer on 2 short films. Everything changed when a man with his face covered came into the store, put a gun to my head, and made me open the register. After that, I lost all passion for almost anything. I still graduated with my bachelor's degree, but I had no desire to continue. I managed to overcome the urge to run my car off the road and stop being miserable, but I couldn't gather the strength to pursue an advanced degree. I believe I am better now. I have made friends and connections that I would not have had if that incident had not occurred, but I still think about it. I remain aware of all entrances and exits when I am at a venue and stay hyper-aware at all times. Story 8. Trigger warning. I had this dog as a small child. I named him Hans, and he was truly my best friend. Hans went everywhere with me and just enjoyed life. My father was a brutal military veteran with serious issues. One day, Hans tried playing with my father, and he snapped, unloading an entire clip into my dog's face. Unfortunately, it was my job to clean up what was left of Hans. It affected me deeply. Story 9. The death of my son occurred when he was just 21 days old. His mother passed away 5 years later. I was in my late 20s, married, and serving actively in the military. I remember thinking about all the adventures and joy that being a father would bring. I don't recall much about the time right after I found out. Friends expressed concern that I might harm myself, but somehow I persevered. I keep fighting the good fight, even though these have been the longest 22 years of my life. As a result, 1. I have never been able to get close to anyone or care about anything since then. 2. I experience hypersexuality. Feels like nothing matters to me. I get up, spend time with friends, and have hobbies. I even tried dating after years of therapy, believing I was ready, but nothing came of it. There is no desire to end my life, yet I lack the passion to truly live. Anyway, enjoy your day. Someone else has it worse somewhere. Story 10. One of my exes was very emotionally abusive with a lot of gaslighting, manipulation, and playing the victim. I couldn't do anything right in their eyes, and even when I did exactly what they told me, they still found fault with it. I was constantly walking on eggshells trying to be someone I could never be. In my next relationship, I shared my experiences, and they assured me they would never treat me the same way. However, they somewhat did. I spent the last year in that relationship constantly trying to avoid issues. I would think carefully about what to say and hide things to prevent them from getting annoyed, even silly things like buying myself a chocolate bar. If they found out, they would get angry with me. They didn't support me. Instead, they got upset that I wasn't happy all the time. They also assaulted me several times, and I had to comfort them afterward when they felt guilty about what they'd done. This experience has made me more cautious about entering another relationship or allowing someone to get that close again. At the same time, it's made me realize that I need to stand up for myself and end things before they escalate. I don't have time to waste on someone who does not respect me. Story 11. Coming home to a letter from my husband telling me he doesn't love me anymore after months of emotional abuse and neglect has left me feeling devastated. I no longer trust anyone, and my self-esteem has yet to recover. Story 12. I broke my neck when I was 18 and was left paralyzed from the chest down. While it severely affected me physically, I believe I am a better person because of it. Story 13. Watching my grandmother slowly die of lung cancer when I was in 5th and 6th grade was incredibly painful. My mother moved her in with us once we found out the cancer had spread to her spine and become terminal. I spent much of that year watching her transform from the person I had known into someone else entirely. Her mind regressed to the level of a child, and eventually, she could not speak at all. She went from being able to walk around to being bedridden. Her body deteriorated from being fairly fit to largely skeletal. To top it all off, I witnessed her lifeless body the night she died. It was horrific and made me acutely aware of mortality from a very young age. Any innocence I had before was completely lost by the time it was all over. This experience also shaped my strong aversion to tobacco and smoking. I will never date or befriend a smoker. I do not care how nice they are or how well we get along. I refuse to be part of the journey while they slowly harm themselves. I also refuse to be anywhere near smokers. If you choose to smoke, that is your decision, but either you step away or I will. Story 14. My good friend from high school harmed my best friend, who was his girlfriend. It affected me deeply and still does, as they are still together, and she denies it ever happened, but I remember. It is hard to believe that I laughed at this person's jokes and spent time with him as if nothing was wrong. I tried to convince her to break up with him, but he is persuasive. There were many troubling things, and I couldn't change her mind about him. Now she is upset because I do not want to see him anymore. I should have reported him, but she said she would protect him if I did that. At least I learned that you cannot save someone who does not want to be saved. Story 15. My stepfather is trying to take my wife from me after we have been married for almost 20 years. Story 16. My college roommate tormented and stalked me after I moved out. 13 years later, my mom wants me to return to school, and I feel really distressed at the thought of it. Story 17. Getting bullied at school made me emotionally scarred and introverted, afraid of what people thought of me. Story 18. When I was 11, I first brought home a C on my report card. My dad shouted at me about how I was worthless and going nowhere in life. Story 19. I was in one of those terrorist attacks where a lot of people died. Watching children being executed is something you don't recover from. Story 20. As a teenager, I received a random message pop-up on AOL with a link to a file repository containing disturbing images involving minors. To this day, those images haunt me. The other event occurred while on vacation when I witnessed a family of 4 on a wave runner collide with a bridge, leaving only the youngest son to survive. Story 21. I had to call the police on my mentally ill father during one of his episodes. He has severe trauma related to the police and has never forgiven me. I regret it to this day. Our relationship never recovered. Story 22. I was living my best life, and overnight I became critically ill due to an epidural abscess on my spine. I lost the ability to walk independently and now require a walker. I lost my job and the ability to practice my craft. However, one thing that has never wavered is my husband. We just celebrated 29 years together. Story 23. Born into poverty in city projects with assisted living, I had an alcoholic father who was a World War II veteran suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. He eventually stopped drinking and smoking and got his life back on track. My mother was a baby factory for a while before birth control became available. I grew up right in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Civil Rights Act. As a child, I had nightmares from all the war coverage, air raid sirens, and the duck and cover drills in schools, constantly fearing that I would die in my sleep from a bomb. We experienced a home invasion once while we were asleep. I witnessed a man take his own life when I was 7 years old. I was just riding down the street on my bike when he ran out onto the porch, and suddenly there was a horrific scene on the concrete. That was my reality at the age of 8. Story 24. Anytime I am the indirect cause of an argument between my parents, it hurts to see my dad get yelled at by my mom because of me. I wish I could tell my mom to back off and leave him alone, but she often responds by screaming, "This is why I hate my life." This happens more often than one might think. Story 25. I lived overseas and found out that my 39-year-old sibling was admitted to the hospital. He walked into the hospital with symptoms of abdominal pain. He had severe pancreatitis and an infection and underwent several surgeries, but nothing helped. He was in a vegetative state for 2 months, sedated on fentanyl, and eventually passed away after multiple organ failures. We tried everything to save him and spent every penny we had, but we ultimately failed. I wish I had more time to spend with him. I wish I had taken more pictures and videos of him for memory. Cremating him was the toughest experience I went through in my life. It has been 8 years and I still haven't healed. A part of me died with him and I was never the same person. My parents were devastated, and they were not the same afterward. My other sibling, who I was closer to, is highly ambitious and intelligent but has a socially awkward personality. She married her childhood sweetheart, but he ended up cheating on her after 10 years of marriage. She never had the courage to confront him and put up with it, eventually falling into depression and becoming delusional. My other sibling passed away during this time, which severely affected her. Her husband divorced her and is now with the woman he cheated with. My sister is not in a good mental state right now and rejects any professional help. She has become a shell of her former self, and the happy, bubbly person is gone. When I look into her eyes, I see nothing behind them. I am afraid that she may harm herself. It is extremely painful to see the sibling you looked up to end up so differently as adults, and there is absolutely nothing you can do to fix it. This is too painful to even type, but I wanted to share this with everyone. If you have a sibling, make the most of the time you have with them and create happy memories. Story 26. I attended a one-room schoolhouse as a boy, with 6 grades crammed together under the guidance of a single teacher. She was unstable, likely suffering from bipolar disorder. Some days, she'd express affection like we were her own children, giving hugs and praises with teary-eyed enthusiasm. Other days, a storm would appear in her eyes, and she'd reach for her weapon of choice. A well-worn wooden paddle, its edges smoothed by years of harsh purpose. She'd lash out due to partial paralysis in her face. The strikes came quickly and without ceremony. With hands out and bending over, we faced the consequences. Sometimes for talking, sometimes for breathing too loudly, and sometimes because the darkness within her demanded it. We could never predict which side of her we would encounter, love or rage, tenderness or terror. Decades later, my body still remembers. If a woman I care about raises her voice in disagreement or moves too quickly toward me, even just to gesture or adjust her hair, my shoulders tense and my breath catches. A deep-seated part of me braces for impact. It's not their fault, but it is my burden to bear. That paddle didn't just leave bruises on my body, it carved grooves in my nervous system, rewiring my expectations of love and anger, safety and punishment. I've spent a lifetime untangling these feelings, learning how to trust without anticipating a blow, how to argue without waiting for a storm. Story 27. My mom was drinking herself to death when I was 20. Now at 41, I am pretty sure I have some issues stemming from that. I am working on it, though. Story 28. My first memories are of being thrown around the house by my violent alcoholic father, crying for my mother to come home from work. Then I was abused by the elderly man across the road who manipulated my parents and me beyond belief. Story 29. My wife told me after 2 years of marriage and the birth of our daughter that she didn't love me anymore and left us. Story 30. My brother, the most important person of my childhood, was abused many times in my presence. As a little girl, I tried everything, but my strength could not compare to that of a grown man. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and social anxiety, and during my teenage years, my mental health deteriorated to the point where I nearly starved myself to death. I still face serious health issues at 23 years old, but I have survived 10 years of suicidal thoughts. Story 31. Roughly 3 years ago, I was sitting on a bench at a main train station when I heard someone overdose on drugs. I heard the screams of the other user trying to save him for months. About a year later, at the same train station, I actually saw someone overdose on drugs. I tried to help him, but he died in my arms. I can't stop dreaming about it. Story 32. During my engagement to my wife, my dad passed away from a heart attack, and my best friend took his own life. I couldn't balance the extreme emotions of being happy to get married while mourning the loss of 2 important people in my life. I still haven't come to terms with any of it. Story 33. I almost died of pneumonia at 4 years old. Mentally, I eventually checked out. When I survived, it was like coming back through that exit door again. But that door never closed, making it difficult to settle and enjoy life because I am always scared of having to leave again. That fear makes it hard to live, develop, and explore the world, knowing that when I die, I will leave everything behind and face that pain once more. Story 34. I lost my best friend, her dad, and her 2 younger siblings in a natural disaster, knowing I was supposed to be there with them. My mom changed her mind the night before due to a gut feeling and didn't let me stay with them. I was 12. Story 35. When I was 7, my sister died from brain cancer. A few weeks later, my dog of 14 years was run over. About 2 months after that, our last remaining dog was poisoned when a batch of EOM's dog food had a production problem in China. Then, 1 month later, the financial crisis of 2008 occurred, and my parents lost all income and never fully recovered. It was a tough time. I am doing much better now, but enduring 10 to 12 years of hardship really affects your mental well-being. Story 36. Watching my ex drink bleach in front of me after an argument was shocking. She later confessed it was an empty bottle, filled with milk, and she pretended to do it to manipulate me. This same ex also cheated on me multiple times in 1 week. When I confronted her and asked with whom, she held up 3 fingers, indicating there were 3 people involved. All were strangers she met that week. Then I turned 20. Story 37. In 2017, I worked for Bed Bath & Beyond in one of their distribution warehouses. I was 36 at the time. On a particular day, I was loading 4 trucks simultaneously. I stepped out of one truck, and the step stool I was using slid out from under me, causing me to fall. I landed on the side of my foot and broke the bone so badly that part of it ended up with my Achilles tendon wrapped around it. I took a plate and 4 screws to repair my bone, along with 6 months of daily physical therapy before I could walk again. I still have to perform those physical therapy exercises to maintain my ability to walk. During those 6 months, I was out of work, and workers' compensation only paid $300 per week. Naturally, $1,200 per month wasn't enough to support a family of four, so my savings were completely depleted during that time. I still haven't fully recovered financially or physically from that incident. Story 38. The most recent experience was finding out that the girl I was seeing is a registered child rapist. She didn't tell me. We had been intimate for months. I found her on the violent sexual offender list, and it significantly affected my mental well-being. You can't hide that from intimate partners. She took away my agency in the same way she did with the two 13-year-olds, although it wasn't as severe. She doesn't see it that way. She said, "I wanted you to get to know the real me before I told you the worst thing I've done in my life," which is grossly manipulative. I am really struggling to trust anyone anymore. Story 39. Like the Final Destination movies where death starts coming after people one after another. Well, that happened to my family. At one time, I had one of the largest families in my city. Over the span of 5 years, I now have one of the smallest. Story 40. I had a few incidents that genuinely had a major effect on me, but when I see what many of you have been through, my troubles just do not seem as significant. I hope that all of you who have faced major trauma find help, and I wish you well. Story 41. I witnessed a suicide just over 5 years ago. I was trying to go to university to use the labs for my project when someone lay down in front of the train. I ended up feeling so guilty for not stopping them that I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and have seen several therapists over the years for it. This was right before the pandemic, so I had no choice but to avoid the area and stay inside with nothing to do, which is the opposite of what my therapist would have preferred. It didn't help that a few months into therapy, a guy I went to school with died in the same way, so all those flashbacks I had while trying to sleep became associated with his face, and the cycle continued. It took me almost a year to stop feeling so guilty and actually realize that if I had tried to stop him, I might have died too. I was diagnosed with moderate depression a couple of years back, and after a lot of tests, there's no real reason for it, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's related to this. This probably sounds self-absorbed, but before all this, I was a happy person and very compassionate toward others. I was always willing to go out of my way to help people, even if it slightly inconvenienced me. I wouldn't think twice about jumping in to help someone, and that's mainly the reason this has affected me so badly. Story 42. Verbal abuse occurs too often between parents and their children. Having experienced 18 years of verbal abuse from my father, I have learned how not to treat my future children. Reading through some of these comments, I realized that my experience is not as severe as others. Story 43. My ex-girlfriend used to harm herself and show me, continuing to say it was my fault. I was 15 and she was 17. She was my first real girlfriend. Story 44. As a child, I had to call the police on my mother because she was extremely intoxicated and harming herself. I felt helpless, and hearing her screams was horrifying. I also felt overwhelming guilt, even though I did it to protect her. Story 45. I was very reckless until my late 20s. Reckless with everything. Those who were part of that journey are no longer in contact with me, but the last time I heard from them, all their lives had spiraled out of control. 2 had taken their lives due to deep addictions, another ended up in jail, a third got infected with HIV, and a girl I knew compromised her health because of multiple abortions. I'm glad I'm still walking on my own 2 feet and alive, but all I know is I'm not the same person anymore. In summary, my late teens to late 20s greatly affected me. Story 46. My mother was a narcissist who suffered from borderline personality disorder. That is not a great combination for a parent, and it led to a variety of difficult situations. She constantly reminded me how much she regretted having me, but the moment that stands out the most was when, during a breakdown, she begged me to let her end her life. I was only 14. What was I supposed to say? What kind of thing is that to do to a child? What a poor example of a parent. Nowadays, it is hard for me to be vulnerable with people or even properly show sympathy without making a joke. I have become someone who cannot even mean it when I say, "I love you." Story 47. All the comments here are incredibly heartbreaking. I genuinely hope everyone is healing, even if it is a slow process. Sending love to you all. Story 48. My wife died last year at almost 43. I watched her fall in our hallway. I yelled to my oldest child to call emergency services. I performed cardiopulmonary resuscitation on her until the paramedics arrived. I still think that if I had done better chest compressions, she might still be here. Story 49. Missing out on friendships during my high school years has been challenging. I am a senior, and due to my unique mental health struggles, I have not been able to start conversations with people I wanted to be friends with. 2 girls showed interest in me. One even slipped a note into my bag, but for some reason, I didn't want to read it. One girl definitely had a crush on me, and I believe the other one did too. One of them was quite forward with her affection, and I didn't mind, as she had liked me since my freshman year. This all occurred during my junior year. Story 50. I had tuberculosis in 8th grade and suffered from it until the end of 11th grade. At the beginning of 11th grade, I met the girl I am with now. She took care of me, and whenever I cried, she consoled me. What haunted me the most during my hospital admissions was not having her beside me. I missed her a lot. But everything is all right now. I just completed my 12th grade board exam, and everything is fine. I just miss her. That's it. Story 51. A suicide. Unrequited love. Then having a chance to be together and finding out he loves me back. But it's too late. So many other things. Story 52. My recent breakup is still affecting me. We had a family, including her cat and the puppy I trained. I moved 6 hours away to be with her, but after a year and a half, it didn't work out. I need to go get the rest of my things today, and I'm not looking forward to it. Strangely, I miss her a lot. It's been an emotional roller coaster. Story 53. My grandma passed away, and I woke up to my mom crying in the middle of the night. I also saved my agency hundreds of millions of dollars, but because I was considered too young, they replaced me with someone who had a PhD, thinking it would make them more credible. Story 54. In a difficult situation, I have been feeling rejected and have been crying every day. I shake violently in my bed, thinking about it. I think about self-harm whenever I see her on the college campus, as her class is opposite mine. When I move slightly to the right, I see her through the window and I often lash out. I'm 17, and while it may sound childish, it is how I feel. Story 55. Watching my ex drink an empty bottle of bleach filled with milk in front of me after an argument was shocking. She later confessed it was just a trick to manipulate me into doing what she wanted. This same ex also cheated on me multiple times over the span of a week. When I confronted her and asked with whom, she just held up 3 fingers, indicating it wasn't just one person but 3 different people she met that week. Then I turned 20. Story 56. I was a freshman in high school and struggled towards the end of the year due to intense exam preparations. My boyfriend at the time cheating with his ex, who was also my former best friend, home life, and overall seasonal depression I didn't know I had. I attempted self-harm in my bathtub but chickened out and left a call for help suicide note in my school's multimedia classroom. As a result, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline was contacted, along with my parents. Things didn't end well. After that incident, I was encouraged to see a mental health professional, which led to my diagnosis of bipolar disorder and the beginning of eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. That incident was a catalyst in my life because it changed me forever. I was no longer seen as normal by those around me. Story 57. I was a freshman in high school and struggled toward the end of the year due to intense exam preparation. My boyfriend at the time cheating with his ex, who happened to be my former best friend, home life, and overall seasonal depression I didn't know I had. I attempted to harm myself in my bathtub with a pocket knife and a rag but chickened out and ended up leaving a call for help note in my school's multimedia classroom. Consequently, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline was contacted, as were my parents. Things didn't end well. After that incident, I was encouraged to see a mental health professional, which was when I received my bipolar eye diagnosis and began eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. That incident was a catalyst in my life because it changed me forever. I was no longer seen as normal by everyone around me. Story 58. My best friend died at 8 years old from a brain aneurysm. My childhood was already challenging, and it only got worse from there. Nearly 12 years later, I am only now processing the grief because I bottled it up. I had a moment of realization that opened the floodgates when she didn't walk across the stage at graduation, and I have been coping ever since. I miss you, Em. Story 59. Divorce and having the person I believed would be my lifelong partner turn into someone who continually uses our children as a tool against me is a deep betrayal. That level of betrayal still affects me years later. It is difficult to trust women in a relationship now. Story 60. Being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints involves certain teachings and practices. They believe in the importance of contributing financially to the church. Marriages conducted outside their temples are considered to lack eternal significance unless both parties are active, tithe-paying members. Additionally, interviews regarding personal matters may take place with members as young as 7, often conducted by local volunteers rather than trained professionals. Story 61. I experienced psychological and physical abuse from my mother for a decade, which resulted in severe insomnia years later. I barely sleep a few hours a week. I attempted to take my own life last year and came close again a month ago. Because of this, I had to quit university, break up with the girl I love, and I can see my cognitive abilities declining each week. Story 62. I watched a friend take his own life over Skype when we were both kids. He did what he felt he had to do. I'm glad I was there for him, even if it haunts me. Story 63. Child with autism. I have 2 children with autism. One is low-functioning and nonverbal, while the other is a gifted individual who received a full scholarship for college and currently earns over $100,000, just 2 years after graduating. Raising a child, now an adult, who requires lifelong care is both expensive and emotionally taxing. I must also save and prepare for his care after I pass away or become incapacitated. Job loss. The company I worked for in Kansas was sold and closed in 2004. I then took a new job in Pennsylvania, but in 2006, that company was also sold and closed. I subsequently accepted a position in Ohio, which closed its office in 2010. I relocated to the Illinois office, but in 2012, they downsized and I was laid off. I have been with my current company since 2013. However, all the losses and relocations have cost me a fortune, including the purchase and furnishing of homes each time. As a result, I have never been able to save for retirement. Story 64. The experiences of Indigenous children in Canada were the beginning of extensive abuse I endured during my childhood. Story 65. My family passed away when I was 31. I ended up with prolonged grief disorder and attempted suicide on New Year's Eve 2017 after being misdiagnosed with treatment-resistant depression and undergoing an excessive and unregulated number of electroconvulsive therapy treatments over 3.5 years, administered against my will. I have been out of institutions since 2022, but the damage was done. I tried to return to work 3 times but am disabled due to seizures and ended up severely injured on the job, resulting in homelessness until a month ago. Now, I am waiting for the malpractice investigations, settlements, and criminal charges to be processed. I really miss my family. Story 66. I experienced public bullying and humiliation in college by a group I believed were my friends. As a result, I have struggled to speak publicly, which has negatively impacted my professional life. I also find it difficult to determine whether my friends are genuine, and I remain wary for an extended period. Story 67. My dad and sister died in a car accident when I was 10. My life was thrown into chaos for a couple of years, but I am finally doing well. Story 68. Watching my mother die was heartbreaking. She had been sick for about a year and passed away a month after my 21st birthday. This event plunged me into a deep depression that lasted for many years. Due to my mindset, I sabotaged many relationships and work opportunities that came my way. Story 69. Having 2 drug-addicted parents from birth onward, one of whom has yet to take responsibility for their addiction and neglect and attempt to move forward. I turn 34 next week. Story 70. My mother passed away when I was in my early teens, and my dad married the Wicked Witch of the West about 4 months later. I became Cinderella, and they didn't even allow me to stay at home. At the start of the school year, they sent me halfway across the state to a military boarding school. I hope it's warm where she is now. Story 71. When I was in my early 20s, I was stuck in a financial career and discovered that my fiancée was being unfaithful. Took me 2 years, including a burnout from work, to realize this. However, I am grateful for the experience as it opened my eyes. Story 72. My parents divorced when I was 11. Changed everything. Here I am almost 50 years later, and it still has disrupted my life. Story 73. I'm not sure there is just one incident that has affected me deeply. I believe there are multiple events, but the one that truly impacted me was in 7th grade. A few weeks before summer break, a classmate and friend was murdered, along with her younger brother and mother. Her father was away on a long-haul job, and her grandmother was back in their home country. One of the neighbors, amid much speculation by the adults, came over and killed them all before taking his own life. I'm better now, somewhat, but following this tragedy, I began to experience depressive episodes that spiraled to the point of suicidal thoughts. Story 74. My parents were arguing in the living room, and it was getting really bad, so I went to see what was going on. I saw my dad holding a butchering knife up to his neck, threatening suicide. My mom pushed me out and told me to go back to my room. Later that evening, my dad smashed his head against the frame of the kitchen door out of anger. He got a massive cut above his right eye, and blood was pouring down into it, making it look very red. I took my dad into their bedroom and called for an ambulance. He told me that he might die that night, but he didn't. My dad was an alcoholic and often abused my mom and me while I was growing up, which made me hate him. However, looking into his eyes with blood pouring down his face while he confided that he might die that night felt different. I turned 20 today, and this was 7 years ago. Now I realize that my dad wasn't the bad guy. He had suspicions that my mom was unfaithful and that she aborted my little sister. Turns out he was right all along. Story 75. My boyfriend passed away 5 years ago, and I still haven't been able to fully pull myself out of the fog that followed. The first year was unbearable. I cried nearly every night and struggled with thoughts of self-harm. Things have gotten a little better over the last few years, but I still can't forget him. Even now, the pain may not be as sharp, but it lingers. There are still moments when I miss him so much it physically hurts. Just the other day, it was raining, and it reminded me of those slow, quiet days we spent together, with him and the dogs just being. I've had time to reflect on our relationship, to see the good and the difficult, and I've grown enough to know what I want to be different in the future. He was my first love. I met him when I was 26, and somehow, he's still stuck in my head and heart. There are so many little things, songs, movies, random moments, that bring him rushing back. Sometimes I catch myself wishing I could just send him a message and share something with him. I loved him deeply, and I always will. But the truth is, I don't want to miss him anymore. Story 76. Identity theft left me with $150,000 in debt. Even after paying off the debt, my perspective on money has forever changed. Story 77. My partner died of breast cancer before she turned 30, which was very difficult and affected me for a while. Story 78. My mom left when I was an infant. She said the reason she left my brother, my dad, and me was that I cried too much as a baby. My dad raised my brother and me. Now that I have a daughter, I will never understand how a parent could leave. I remember vividly in first grade we were making Mother's Day gifts in school. All the students couldn't wait to give their moms the gifts they made. I made mine for my dad, and he still has that gift to this day. On Mother's Day, I will always celebrate him. Her leaving still affects me when I think about it. My daughter will never know what that pain feels like. She will always know that she has a mom watching her at her sporting events and piano recitals. She will never know the pain of looking in the crowd at those events and wondering if her mom will care enough to show up for her. Story 79. I don't know if it affected me because I was so young, but I found my dad unresponsive in his chair. My very first memory is of a funeral, and one of my childhood friends split his head open when he fell off a tractor. Story 80. My girlfriend has an eating disorder. She is not diagnosed, but it is obvious. I believe she developed it last summer, and it has been a constant fluctuating path for our relationship. We live in a long-distance relationship, but we text a lot. Some of her messages have been extremely saddening and gut-wrenching, especially since I struggle to comfort people, and I am not qualified to really tell her what she should do. She is often engaged in self-harm and told me she hated her body, no matter how often I told her that she was beautiful. She can no longer take showers with the lights on and the water running, and she has developed a fear of full-length mirrors. This all reached a peak when she told me she was about to take an overdose of sleeping pills. I immediately made a video call with her, trying to comfort her as best as I could. She did take the pills for a moment but then spit them out again. During those seconds, I felt absolutely helpless. Thankfully, nothing happened. Ever since that incident, I sometimes feel apathetic towards her self-harm. Sure, it worries me, but I have also come to terms with what could happen. It is genuinely horrible because I really love her, but these episodes of apathy make me question that. I also think she has passed her eating disorder to me because I think about my weight more than ever and I feel strangely careless when it comes to medication. Every time my parents mention something about my body, whether positive or negative, I always feel terrible. Things are improving a bit right now with my girlfriend, and I am really happy she is doing better. We see each other more often and talk as much as possible. Story 81. This happened fairly recently. I realized that the lead singer of a band I like was essentially trying to manipulate me during Instagram lives by saying overly nice things to me and only me. When it suddenly hit me that something was wrong, it sent me into a 2-week-long anxiety spiral, resulting in a lack of motivation to do anything and multiple mental breakdowns. I also think my trust issues have worsened. Story 82. Someone close to me ended up in a facility for a week for auditory hallucinations. Additionally, my son was born at 26 weeks gestation and was in the neonatal intensive care unit for 3 months. Both of these incidents affected me deeply. Story 83. The death of my father when I was 13 was a profound loss. Lost and angry does not begin to describe my feelings. My life took a completely different trajectory. Story 84. My husband became very ill in 2018 and nearly died. He spent 113 days in the hospital and had to relearn how to do everything, such as feeding himself and walking. Story 85. I developed acute pediatric sternal osteomyelitis at the age of 11, a rare infection with fewer than 100 recorded cases. Surprisingly, Staphylococcus bacteria from a minor cut migrated to the bone marrow of my sternum and caused the infection. Imagine being the patient in an episode of a medical drama, but you are 11 years old, in so much pain that you black out from breathing too hard and feel like you are going to die. Story 86. Stage 3 nasopharyngeal carcinoma at age 15. I spent 3 years in treatment, which included radiation to nearly every part of my body above my mid-thigh and several rounds of chemotherapy. I am still working to adjust my life to the effects of the treatments, 15 years into remission. Story 87. I wasn't diagnosed with autism until I became an adult. As a child, I was constantly misunderstood, and the adults in my life always assumed the worst of me. They yelled at me and punished me, despite my having no ill intentions. It broke me. I lost half of my life to depression and dissociation. I lost the things that mattered most to me, not even realizing it at the time. I want things to get better, but I'm so lost now. Story 88. I have borderline personality disorder, and a few years ago, when I was at my lowest, I reached out to one person for help. I was experiencing thoughts of self-harm and had already attempted it twice before seeking their support. They rejected me, and my mind essentially shut down for hours. I ran away, planning to take my life at home by myself. I felt unable to speak or move for a long time. My family came and tried to talk to me, but after several hours of unsuccessful attempts, I realized I needed professional help. The next day, I went to a psychiatric ward, was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and about 3 years later, here I am. I turned my life around. I did a complete 180. I am now an optimist and learn from my mistakes and experiences. It's safe to say that on the worst night of my life, I made a life-changing decision. Story 89. My friend and I were in the garage hanging out. He had just bought a motorcycle and we decided to take it out. I rode it through the neighborhood and returned. He wanted to take it up the road for 1 mile on a route he had traveled earlier in the day. After 10 minutes of waiting by the mailbox, I began to worry, and then I saw flashing lights. By the time I got there, he had passed. It messed me up for years. Losing your best friend so suddenly is awful. Story 90. I watched my brother have a seizure while we were on our way to high school in our dad's truck. Suddenly, it looked like he was spasming. I screamed in the car as he drove us through 2 empty lanes until we came to a complete stop by hitting another truck that happened to be parked in the middle of the field. I went to jail once because a police officer thought I was under the influence and I happened to drive through a drug-infested area in Alabama at 9 p.m. I sat there for 16 hours with kids younger than me trying to meditate and sleep. One well-built guy kept pacing back and forth while discussing the different snacks he wanted. I saw what rock bottom looked like in my last hour when a young man came in and sat on the floor because there was no room anywhere else. He talked about how his marriage was over while coming down from a drug high. A year later, my grandparents passed away one by one as I watched my grandpa lose hope and drink himself to cirrhosis. I never saw him drink until my grandma passed. I'm glad they are at peace. Then, my mom got sepsis and later cancer, and she passed away a year after them. I've changed since then. My perception of how people handle grief has evolved, and I understand how unfair it feels when you may be the only one who knows how it feels. Take things slowly and move at your own pace. If you don't feel like being happy, no one should force you to be. Happiness will come to you, and when it does, it may pass by, but you'll find it again. Story 91. My dad passed away in June. He was in the hospital for shortness of breath and atrial fibrillation. He was supposed to go home when he started coughing up blood. The nursing staff and doctor were very dismissive as we begged for help. They knew he was on a lot of blood thinners and had a history of gastrointestinal bleeds, but said his throat was just irritated. He aspirated and stayed in the intensive care unit for 20 days. We were there for every single visit during that time. The nurse practitioner mentioned he knew he was about to be intubated in the intensive care unit and understood the situation. Meanwhile, the respiratory team documented that he was non-responsive. We remained hopeful despite the discrepancies in their communication. I wish someone had been honest with us. Story 92. It was already a mistake, but I am doing my job and handling the issues that arise in shopping centers. It is challenging. Story 93. Trigger warning. Miscarrying at 10 weeks in a public restroom after crying in agony in a hospital waiting room for 4 hours was devastating. The hospital staff did not care. I sat in a large puddle of blood, despite changing a large pad every 10 minutes, because I was bleeding so heavily. My boyfriend begged a nurse to help me or at least find me some clean clothes. They refused to give me any pain medication despite my painful contractions. I had been in the hospital for a suspected miscarriage before, where they provided methadone for the pain, but the staff this time wouldn't even give me a paracetamol. I ended up locking myself in the restroom for half an hour until a doctor finally saw me. I was just lying on the floor crying. Eventually, they sent us to a ward where we spoke with some nice nurses who were sympathetic before calling the doctors. The 2 male doctors were horrible. They questioned me and accused me of taking something to purposely miscarry. They said I was too young to be having a baby anyway. I begged them to find out why it happened, so they took blood samples from me and sent me home with no medication because the doctors refused to give me anything, stating that I didn't need it. My boyfriend questioned how much blood I lost. If you soak a pad within 30 minutes, you are supposed to have a blood transfusion, and I soaked pads within minutes, hence why I was covered in blood. They said I was fine and sent me home. Later, I received a letter stating that my blood results were normal, and that was that. Over half a year passed, and during a regular doctor's checkup, this doctor was horrified. My blood results were not normal. She clearly saw in the results why I miscarried and ordered urgent blood tests, which showed that since I didn't have a blood transfusion, my body was struggling. It took a year for my blood tests to show normal results after I was prescribed a lot of medication to help. I've been told by other doctors that the hospital doctors were lucky I didn't die, but I now have permanent health issues because they didn't give me that blood transfusion. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.